Glorious day that will be, and what a glorious time that we have right now to read from the Word of God. And our scripture reading today is from Mark chapter 7, verses 24 through 30. Mark 7:24. Jesus left that place and went to the vicinity of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know it. Yet he could not keep his presence secret. In fact, as soon as she heard about him, a woman whose little daughter was possessed by an impure spirit came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek born in Syrian Phoenicia. She begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. First, let the children eat all they want, he told her, for it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Lord, she replied, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. Then he told her, for such a reply, you may go. The demon has left your daughter. She went home and found her child lying on the bed and the demon gone.
Hey, everybody. Good morning. Always good to hear a good morning. It's good to be with you all here this morning, and it's good to have been with you up to this point in the summer. Madeline and I have been here uniquely since the beginning of June or end of May, which is not something that we get to do all the time. For the last 4 or 5 years before we moved up to Chicago, I worked at a church in Springfield. And the thing about working at churches is that you work on Sundays, and so I haven't been able to be with you very much, but the times that I have been very encouraging, but those have mostly been at like Christmas. And so, you can imagine my shock when we showed up in June and, there was no Christmas sermon, right? I just assumed that you guys were talking about it all the time or something, So it's been wonderful to get to know this congregation a little better. I've enjoyed the privilege of teaching the Sunday morning classes, as Larry has already said, and I don't take that for granted, and I see it as an enormous privilege to be up here speaking with you this morning. As Larry has already pointed out, I spend quite a lot of my time in the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament. I don't live a very exciting life. I spend a lot of time sitting down and reading various places from the Old Testament. And as somebody who spends a very long time sitting and reading stuff from the Old Testament, I will tell you I enjoy the Old Testament. Those are my favorite stories growing up, and I love the stories of the Old Testament. But there is nothing like coming across Jesus interacting with people. Right? There's nothing quite like Jesus in the Bible, and there's nobody quite like Jesus, I think, in any book that you pick up, because Jesus always seems to say the right thing. He always interacts with people in the way that they exactly need, right? He doesn't say the kinds of things that we say, right? He doesn't, there's no cookie cutter response from Jesus, right? He doesn't, approach people and say, well, man with the withered hand, you have to let go and let God, or something like that. He doesn't say stuff like that. When Jesus interacts with a person, it's always something different, and it's always precisely what they need. And we know this is wonderful, and I know you know this is wonderful because we've just been singing about it, right? What a day, glorious day it will be, right? When my Jesus I will see. Why do we sing that? I think in part because we wonder ourselves, what is the exact right thing that I need to hear? Right? What would Jesus say to me to heal my soul? Right? Jesus knows where I come from. What would he say to me? And for this reason, the passage that we've just read is very strange, isn't it? As that was being read, I'm sure some of you were thinking, what is he thinking? Right? Why that one? Right? And it's a doozy of a passage. You know, there's all sorts of things in this passage. That's quite small, but we have demon possession. That's, we don't deal with that one very much anymore. It doesn't seem, it's kind of out there. And then we have this strange interaction between the woman and Jesus, where Jesus, this guy who always says the right thing, is one, he's gone into Tyre, and he's trying to be hidden, but then she finds him anyway, and then they have this interaction, and it kind of sounds like he's calling her a dog, and it's like, what is going on, right? And we come away maybe reading this passage thinking like, did Jesus have an off day? Like, did he, because I'm not so good at evangelizing, right? But I've never minced my words, quite like this, right? What's going on here in this passage? And because this passage is so strange, I think in my time in the church, I've found that we do two things with it. One, we can treat this passage, this story, almost like that relative who's kind of a loose cannon, that person who's, is in our family. We love them, but, they'll just kind of say anything, right? And so we don't bring them around at holidays, when we have our acquaintances meet them. We're kind of afraid, and so we avoid it, right? We avoid the passage. Nobody's reading this on Easter, right? Or Christmas. You can trust that this passage is not being read around the world on Easter, right? Or what we do with this passage is we soften it. We soften it up, right? There are probably 20 commentaries on this passage that will suggest that maybe Jesus winked, when he said it. These are actual scholars who will say, Jesus said, "First allow the children to be satisfied, for it's not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." Which is weird, right? Or they'll say, well, we don't know how he said it. Maybe he's kind of, being a little cute, which, and I don't want to take that possibility away, because this is text, right? We don't know how Jesus said any of this, right? But I think we know who Jesus is. And so our instinct when we come across the passage, and maybe at first we don't understand it, is to soften it up a bit and say, well, he didn't mean it, or he said it for this reason, or he said it, but he didn't really say it, and obviously she knew that because she did. But I've found that when you sit with this passage, this story, it's a tragedy that we don't spend, that it's not a very popular story, because I think it's a very touching story. And when you sit with the story and you just read the words and you just think about why what's being said is being said, and you sit with it, I think we're going to uncover something really special here, something really unique in the Bible. This is a remarkable story, and I'd like to make a case for that, if you don't mind. So what we're going to do is we're just going to walk through it, and I'm going to tease some things out and help to illustrate what's going on here, and then we'll conclude with some takeaways. You good? All right, that's what we'll do. So first of all, we need to put ourselves in the story, and not just tell the story, but to put ourselves in the story. And we start with the woman. In this story, we meet a woman. We meet a woman who is from Tyre. So Jesus, this is a portion of Mark's gospel where he's been carrying out his ministry in around Galilee, which is down here around the sea, and he's been jumping around here and going to various synagogues and things, and he's been teaching to the Jewish people down there. And as he's been doing that, he's been getting exceedingly frustrated, right? Because they have started to put all of these religious rules that they've sort of built up around their beliefs, and they've started to put those ahead of taking care of people, healing people, right? Helping people, right? And because of this, they've sort of missed the point. And so Jesus has just done a lot of teaching about what defiles a person, right? Is it the food laws? Is it food that defiles us, or is it the stuff that comes out of our mouth? Is it the things that we say, the things that we do, right? He starts to talk like this. And eventually, at the beginning of this passage, he gets frustrated, and he leaves. And he leaves Galilee, which is a big deal because he's leaving an area with a majority Jewish population, and he's going out to Tyre and Sidon. And these cities, where this woman is from, these are not like Galilee. Right? They're not like Galilee because they're port cities. They're port cities, and so they're big, they're wealthy. Right? There's actually some beef between the people in Galilee and the people in Tyre, because the majority of the products that are produced in Galilee, like whether that be the fish that are being fished out of the ground, out of the lake there, or whether it's the crops that are being produced, the majority of that food is shipped out of this poor, impoverished region of Galilee to the big city where people have the money to buy it. And so if you are a Jew growing up in Galilee and you're a fisherman, you know that 9 out of every 10 of the fish that you're bringing out they're not being eaten by you. They're not being eaten by your kids. They're not being eaten by your relatives, your extended family, your friends, your neighbors. Not being eaten by those people. They're being eaten by these people up in Tyre, up in the big city. Right? And there's the same sort of like rural-urban divide, right? But she's from Tyre, which is a wealthy place. It's a huge place. And more than that, it's a place of culture. Because people come through Galilee, but Tyre, it's a port city, right? People are coming from all areas of the known world, right, to come through Tyre, right? These are people who have a diversity of ideas around them and who have money and wealth. They're completely different from the Galileans. What else do we know about this woman? Well, we know that she is a Hellen. So in the passage we read earlier, this read Gentile, but if you can read there, it's verse 26. Now the woman was a Hellen, Syrophoenician by race, and oh man, I should have proofread this. Was begging him in order that he might send the demon out of her daughter. This is not the typical Greek word for Gentile, right? Ethnos, right? This is Hellen, specifically Greek. And the idea is that this is somebody who is Hellenized. This is somebody who is bought into the culture, right? This is a woman of the world. When Alexander the Great came in and took over this area and beyond, what did he do? He Hellenized that area. He brought Greek culture. Right? So this isn't a woman from Galilee. This isn't a woman who practices the traditions of the Jews who've been passed around for centuries. This is somebody who is submerged in the prevailing secular culture of the day. Right? She's a Helen. More than that, she is which means she is a polytheist too. Much like us, she is somebody who puts her trust and her faith and her time and her energy into all sorts of other things. Right? She is somebody who worships other gods. A polytheist, not a monotheist. And more than that, she is by race a Syrophoenician. Okay. Syrophoenician. So she's born in this area. She's not a Jew. Right? Not a Jew by culture, not by race, not by practice or by blood. And to this point, this is a big deal because Jesus, at this point in Mark, is a Jewish Messiah here to rescue the Jewish people, right? To help them. At this point, he's not really helped a Gentile, right? Helen. He's not really moved outside of Galilee. And if you knew nothing about Jesus, if you had never read the Gospels before and you had only read up to Mark 7, you're wondering if Jesus is going to help this person at all. And what I'd like to point out to you here, by putting all of these attributes onto this woman, Mark is painting the portrait of a person that Jesus is the least likely to help. Right? The least likely to help. She's not from his hometown. In fact, she's from that leech up there that takes all of the wealth out of Galilee where he lives. She's not somebody who is engulfed in Jewish culture. In fact, she's a Hellen. She's a very secular person. She's from this wealthy metropolis. She's a polytheist. She's a Syrophoenician. She's not somebody who is high up on the list of people who Jesus is likely to help. Right? Especially not if you're reading through Mark up to this point. But more than that, she's a woman with a big problem. Her daughter, we learn in this passage, has an unclean spirit. She's been possessed by a demon. And this problem by itself is an awful one. Based off of our extra biblical sources in this time, and they have different ways of depicting and thinking about this, but this involves a clenching of teeth, loss of wits, rolling of eyes, right? Based off of our New Testament sources, we know that people who are said to have unclean spirits can be violent, right? They can be thrown on the ground. In fact, in verse 30 of this passage, where it says the mother returns and finds her daughter lying there on the ground, the verb is not lying. It's a perfect form of the word throw, right? A passive form. She's been thrown down on the bed, right? It's a very violent problem, and it leads to all sorts of strange behavior. And it's a problem that people didn't really know how to deal with. Right? So outside of our biblical sources, when it comes to this thing that we call demon possession, this thing that was happening, we have the Hippocratic corpus, and they have their own things to say about this. And can we turn off the closed captions real quick so I can read this? And this is a physician in and around the time of Jesus. This is on the sacred illness, is what they called it. He says, the nature of the illness called sacred is as follows. It seems to me in no way more divine or sacred than other illnesses, but it has its own nature. And just as the other illnesses have a condition from which they arise, this illness also has a natural cause, but people believed on account of their inexperience and astonishment that it was some divine act because it is nothing like other illnesses. Right? This is a physician who sees all range of stuff, and he says, this is unlike anything. Right? Because of their difficulty in understanding the illness, they insist on its divinity, but in light of the simple manner of treatment that they apply, since they treat it with purifications and incantations, its divinity is undercut. Right? In other words, this physician is seeing people who are acting like the people that Mark describes. They're being thrown on the ground, they're clenching their teeth, their eyes are rolling back in their head, they're being thrashed around, they're having all of these violent mood swings. And he says, it's not a divine problem, and people are silly to think it's a divine problem, but any rational person would know that it's caused because they have too much phlegm. It's not a joke. He actually says this. Because people with too much bile don't act like this. Which is, kind of a commentary on medicine. I think it's funny. He ends with this, though. And this is how they would treat this. Whoever knows how to cause in people a dry, moist, cold, or warm condition through regimen could also heal this illness. If this person could distinguish the right time for beneficial treatment without purifications, spells, and all such quackery, which has become one of my favorite words, quackery. Right? In other words, if you were living in this time, and you had a daughter who's being thrown on the ground and having sort of seizures and these violent mood swings, and you just didn't know what was going on. It's very distressing. How would they solve this? Well, they'd come to your house and say, you should put her outside so that she can dry up and then she'll get better, right? And then if that doesn't work, we have accounts of people tying up people like this because they become very dangerous. And you have tired and desperate conversations back and forth between physicians and patients about that time that they struck their loved one who was dealing with this because it was just getting so frustrating and overwhelming. And this woman is dealing with this. This is what is waiting when she comes home. This disease, this possession, this problem that is way beyond her grasp, and that there's no physician, there's no philosopher, there's nobody that can help her with this. And you have to know she's tried because she's doing something desperate now. Because she's this wealthy woman from Tyre, and she's gone out to pursue somebody, this Jewish rabbi who's been wandering around in the desert and teaching all sorts of things. This is sort of a Hail Mary throw here, right? She's desperate. Everything else is not gone well. She's out of answers, right? She's seeking a mysterious person in the desert, and she comes to his feet and falls before him, falls on his feet, and says, Lord, I have a problem, right? And we can imagine it. Just embellish with me for a moment. I have a problem and I can't solve it. And no one can. No physicians, no philosophers, no home remedies, nothing will solve it. And she's my daughter, and I'm her mother, and I'm supposed to be able to help her, but I can't. And I'm out of answers, and I'm out of strength, and I'm out of courage, and I'm out of energy, and if you don't help me, I can't go home, right? I can't go back to this without an answer, without help. Please cast this thing out of my daughter, right? Please, I'm begging you. And in this moment, when she's exhausted all other options, and nobody's been able to help her, and she's gone seeking, trying to track down rumors of this Messiah, and she's tracked him down, and she has fallen on her face in this moment where she can't imagine, like she feels like she's hit rock bottom here. You can't imagine getting any lower than this. She, wealthy, probably woman from Tyre, is falling before this poor, homeless Messiah figure, begging. And what is she here? Woman, you don't take bread from Jewish children and throw it to Syrophoenician dogs, right? First allow the children to be satisfied, for it is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs, right? This is humiliating, right? And you, maybe you've been in a situation like this, where you humble yourself in front of somebody, you ask for something, and then they don't give it to you, right? But this is insult added on top of that. And what is Jesus doing? Is he winking? Is he saying it in some mysterious way that she'll understand? I don't think so. I think we just have to take it as it is. And I think there are a couple things that inform how we think about this. First of all, why has Jesus gone to Tyre? Why has he left the Jews? Why has he gone into Gentile territory, if not to help them, right? This is sort of what Jesus does. It seems like it's his intention to do some healing, maybe some ministry over here. So I don't get the impression that Jesus changes his mind here, that he doesn't want to heal her. And so what is he doing? Well, he's putting another hurdle in front of her, certainly. And I don't know if this is maybe a fair metaphor, but I'll give you two. This is how I think about what Jesus is doing here. When I was a college minister at Watermill in Springfield, it was a job that I really enjoyed because you got to see people grow over time. You got to see people enter as a freshman and then graduate as a senior and move on and live happy lives. Or I assume, I don't know. I would assume they do, but you get to grow and develop them, right? And you get to there are some times when you come across a young man in your group, and you know what's inside of him. You know what he could be. But he's not quite there yet. And so you have to come up to him and you have to say, hey, would you mind teaching class in a couple days? Would you mind teaching class tomorrow? And the look on people's faces when you ask them to teach a class in a couple of days is like, it's like you're torturing them, right? And they don't want to say no. And it's incredibly uncomfortable, right? It's incredibly painful. But what happens? They without it, they don't grow into the kind of people that they could be, right? I can't speak from experience on this one, because although Wesley is advanced beyond any other child his age, he has not learned to walk yet, but we think maybe next month. Get it? You've probably taught your child how to walk, or maybe you've seen it happen. And what do? You set them over here. You walk over here, and they start to walk to you, and you say, "Come on, come on." And they get close, and they've walked a long way, and they get really close. And what do? Come on, right? And the look of betrayal is they're like, "I just made it, Why are you scooting back from me, right?" And you don't scoot back to inflict pain. You don't scoot back so that they don't trust you anymore, to teach them life's hard like that, You scoot back because you know they can do it. Because if you take that step back, they'll walk further, and they can walk further. And it's not a test. You're not discovering whether or not they can. It's not a test. It's one of the the final blows that it takes to sharpen that piece of steel into a tool, right? Into the desired object. What's Jesus doing here? Does it seem harsh? Does it seem cruel? What's Jesus doing here? It's not a test. He's not waiting to see, well, maybe she'll walk away. There's something about Jesus. He knows what people need. He knows, right, that what she needs is this last little bit, right, to get over the hump, to establish her faith. And what does she do? And how is she able to do it? Well, she says, if we go back here, way back here, I guess. Lord, even the dogs under the table eat of the children's crumbs. And why is she able to do this? She stands, why is she able to endure? Well, because somewhere along the way, she started to believe in somebody. Somewhere along the way, she started to believe in the Jesus everybody was talking about, the Jesus that was cleansing the lepers, the Jesus that was healing on the Sabbath, the Jesus that was feeding the 5,000. And she believed in that Jesus beyond what she could see, beyond what she could hear. And she wasn't willing to take no for an answer. Right. She touched lepers, right? You calmed storms and you healed the Sabbath. Don't tell me you can't help me. Don't tell me you can't heal her, right? My daughter. Right. I can't have the Jewish bread. I can't have the bread of life. Fine. I'm not worthy. Fine. Give me a crumb. Because I know what you can do with a crumb. You fed 5,000 with 5 loaves. Right? And I trust a crumb from your table beyond medicine, beyond philosophy, beyond any other answer that my world is providing me. I trust this. Just a crumb from your table. Just a word from your lips. Just give me something. And he does. And he does. Now, we're out of time here, so I'd like to just recap here, maybe. And I'm not going to sing. What do we take away from this strange story? Well, first of all, our journey towards freedom, our journey towards salvation, begins when we run out of answers. It begins when everything else has been exhausted. When we come and we fall before Jesus and we have to call him Lord, right? Because nothing else has worked. Earlier in our Psalms class, Psalm 51, there's a part of that verse where it says, the sacrifices of God are a broken and shattered heart. Right? Why? Because that person is ready. The ground is ready. Right? And so if you're out of answers, if everything that has promised to put your life together has failed, then you're ready to begin. The second thing, on this path towards salvation, there will be people who will tell us that Jesus' ministry, that his salvation isn't for us, isn't for you. And what we should take from this woman is that we shouldn't let anybody tell us that. Don't let your friend tell you that. Don't let your coworker tell you that. Don't let your spouse tell you that. Don't let yourself tell you that. If the Son of God himself looks at you and says, my ministry isn't for you, you take him by the shoulders, like Jacob wrestling God, and you say, bless me. So I won't let go until you bless me. Don't believe him, right? Say, give me a crumb, right? Give me anything. no matter who tells you. We have to believe that. And the last thing, Jesus can do a lot with a crumb, a lot with a little. This woman asks for a crumb, and it changes her life. It saves her life. It saves her daughter's life. And sometimes we look at those small things and we don't think anything of them, right? A dip in this water, right? A prayer, a plea, a scripture, crumbs. Not so. Jesus will feed you, will heal you, and take care of you with those things. Right? No matter how small they seem, we have to believe that he will change our lives with them. Do you believe that? Do you believe that? If you'd like to take your first step on that journey, we're here to offer that for you. We'd love to help you do that, to put on Christ in baptism, to invite him into your life to start changing you for the better. If you need a crumb this morning, if you need a prayer, if you need an arm around your shoulder, if you need a scripture, if you need a hug, if you need whatever you need, we have an elder up here in the front, and we'll have an elder there in the back. And we ask you to come with your need as we stand and sing.